Today is Monday, July 25th, 2022. Time is 10:03 a.m. This is a special meeting agenda. Attending are Commissioners Duncan and Filios. We're going to be discussing impact fees. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. We have two items for consideration, without which, if these are not addressed, we basically cannot go forward, at least with regard to the fee specific to the county. So item number one is consideration of the commitment to hiring additional patrol deputies as condition for impact fee implementation, and this is an action item. Ann, please. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners. The reason this issue is in front of you, I believe we discussed it a bit when I briefed you a few weeks ago. Just confirming you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to ask development to pay impact fees to build space for sheriff's deputies, patrol deputies, if we're not going to be able to hire that many. And on the jail side, we have looked at the number of jail deputies that would be needed as around 13. And so I wanted to take those two issues separately and see if you had some thoughts about what what was a sustainable level of funding. When I originally gave you the report, it said 42 sheriff's deputies. I was using higher gross projections, and Commissioner Duncan provided me with your MPO's recent growth calculations for the county, and so I have become more conservative with those, and that obviously has then cut down the number of sheriff's deputies that would be needed. So you're really looking at 29 new FTEs over the next 10 years for patrol.
Okay, how many for the jail?
The number of 13 that I got from the jail isn't based on population. I think it was based more on whatever ratio they have to keep per number of inmates. So I'm less concerned about that unless I do have on the CIP radios and weaponry for those 13 in the jail, and if we knew we weren't going to be able to fund those, I'd want to at least take those off. It's not a huge amount of money, and it might be better not to put them on. It's about $170,000 for weaponry and radios for the 13. If I did not collect impact fees for those at this point, you still would be able to collect the amount necessary for the 2 additional pods and administrative space for growth. That's just one way to solve it without you having to give a pretty good level of commitment. Obviously, I'm not binding you. I can't bind you to approving the budget. It's more of do we have a reasonable belief that we would have additional tax revenue that would offset that. But on the sheriff's side, I'm basing the amount of about 20,000 square feet of additional space for the sheriff's office. Remember, we talked could be a substation in Hayden or an expansion of existing. That $20,000 20,000 square feet is based on an assumption of 29 growth-related deputies, and that's what would be required to keep your current level of service of, I believe, 0.56 deputies per 1,000.
Okay. So you need a commitment from us, and today, that would say, okay, we're committed to hiring the 29 patrol deputies and any associated facilities over the next 10 years. Is that correct?
I don't think I need you to commit to it. Obviously, that's an annual process that you would do based on your budget.
Okay.
I think we would want some understanding that you believed that was fiscally attainable. if I said 80, you would probably say there's no way we can fund that, even if that's what it takes to keep the level of service.
Right.
If I take 29 and you think, oh, that gets about 3 a year, that's a different question. So I don't need to bind you to it. I don't need you to commit to it from a budgetary perspective. I just need you to say it is fiscally feasible that you would have that. And obviously we will adjust over time.
Okay, got it.
Knowing that House Bill 389 doesn't give you, 100% of your gross tax revenues. And you don't need to commit to funding any of the non-growth related capital improvements because those are separated. Everything on your sheriff's CIP is impact fee related. There's nothing you need to pay for with general funds. And the jail CIP, we did talk about. One of the questions I had was whether or not you felt you had a plan in place to build out those 2 pods from 2018 to meet existing DOJ requirements.
Okay.
I think the advisory committee is saying we don't want to approve 2 more jail pods for growth if the county can't even build the 2 that they need now. So those are my questions for you for today.
Okay. It isn't so much that we couldn't build them now. I think it's more a question of the staffing than anything else. But okay, let's. Okay, so we have some.
And I don't need you to say that you can build them now. It's over the next 10 years.
Sure.
Do you at least have an awareness that you'll need to build out the 2 now with general funds? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we do have the funds
For the 2.
for those pods, but once again, we're waiting if we could staff what we have now, because I think that there's still a pod shut down. So if we could open up that pod, are we fully open now? Okay. So yeah, it would be a matter of getting fully up to staff with what we have now, and then we could build out those pods, assuming we can hire the staff to fill that. So we had our business analysts do analysis here, and it looks like we would be committing the county to 1% tax raise in perpetuity to cover these additional deputies. So, I mean, obviously we can't encumber future boards, but that's what it
Right.
boils down to is 1% a year. So what happens in a recession or something, or there's some other emergency and we cannot hire, we cannot fund those additional deputies? Does that put our impact fees in jeopardy?
No, it doesn't. Because I can't bind a future commission, this is basically just I want to have some record of, you all have thought about the fiscal feasibility, you have a plan, generally for how you're going to address your non-growth related expenses. And every time the world shifts, we shift the CIP as well. So we're not expected to know, what will happen over the next 10 years. We just have to update it as we go along. So if you were just not able, I'm less concerned on the jail side because what we're building for jail is pods based on the number of inmates. So obviously you'll get to a point if you can't staff it, you'll have a more critical issue with the Department of Justice probably than with impact fees. On the sheriff's side, you're not going to obviously build this new substation immediately. So if we got 3 years from now and it just did not look like you were going to be able to either do 1% or to staff even up to where you were, we would adjust that downward. That wouldn't put any of your currently, any of the impact fees you had already received at risk because it's still, we would just be building less square footage if we end up not being able to afford 29. So I just want to make sure, I always ask electeds, if you have absolutely no plan to keep your level of service consistent, I need to know that now. But if you have the intention and a reasonable fiscal plan for doing that, based on what you know today, That's all I'm looking for.
I don't know that I can argue with that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. As a matter of fact, we've asked the sheriff for his 5-year strategic plan, and I'm comfortable with knowing that, you know, if we're going to grow, we are going to need to fund more officers, and so that's not an issue for me. And as far as building out the pods, the money is here. We just have to make sure we can staff them, and I think that. The 20,000 square foot, can that be an addition onto the sheriff's department? Does that have to be a separate building? And what if we already have the building?
You can't, let's see, if you already have a building that will accommodate 29 more deputies, then we don't need to collect impact fees at all. Gotcha. My understanding was that you were out of space, you'd either need to expand or put a substation in somewhere.
Gotcha. Perfect. That answers my question. Yeah, we don't have one to house 29 officers.
Okay.
But some special units, I think we're looking at some rearranging. So, yeah.
Right. You might rearrange them and put them in a different place to geographically continue to provide the level of service. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So at this point, for me, I'm fine with understanding what it's going to cost us, and we'll have to address it every single year and figure out how we can get those 3 officers on board. Yeah, provided we can hire people.
So, Ann, do you need...
And you don't need to do 3 every single year. You could, wait until year 4 when you think growth might give you enough incremental new tax and then do those FTEs. It's just, 10 years from now, is it reasonable to believe that you're committed from a policy perspective and that there would be a way to fund the 29 to keep the level of service? And you're telling me yes, and that's all I needed to know.
This is Bill Brooks. I think that's a very flexible, doable plan, and that Ann is not asking for a hardcore commitment, but rather direction. I think that's exactly where we need to be today.
Okay. Let the record show that Commissioner Bill Brooks has joined us. Does that satisfy your request, Ann? Or do you
yes,
need
it does. I can move ahead with the final report. The advisory committee, I can schedule their final meeting, and they will, I hope to have them provide you with their recommendation early September.
Pat, do you have anything to add?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I do agree with everything Ann says, and I think that what you're agreeing to is very prudent, and of course, as growth changes, the CIP may change, the impact fees may change. I'm not concerned about it from that standpoint.
Fair enough. Okay.
Well, that was easy, wasn't it?
I guess.
Do you need me for anything else?
No, I was just going to call for public comment. Okay, so hearing none, I have 10:16. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you,
Thank
Ann.
you all. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.